Hello, I'm Minerva Delgado. Sudan is in the midst of the world's largest humanitarian disaster. Famine has officially been declared in parts of the country, and 25 million people have reached crisis levels of food insecurity. Further, ongoing conflict and internal displacement have decimated communities and severely hampered agriculture, commerce, and aid deliveries. With an ongoing and complicated crisis, understanding the current situation and needs is critical. On this episode of Voices to End Hunger, I speak to two on-the-ground experts about the current crisis. Matilda Okech of World Renew in Nairobi, Kenya, and Eltayeb Omer Hamid of the Dutch organization ZOA in Sudan. We talk about the crisis, how organizations like theirs are attempting to meet the need, and what advocates need to do to bring the crisis the attention and assistance it desperately needs. Matilda, Eltayeb, welcome to the Voices to End Hunger podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Before we get started, I know our listeners would love to learn a little bit more about both of you and your organizations. Matilda, World Renew is a member of the Alliance to End Hunger. Can you talk a little bit about yourself and World Renew's work with Sudan and the region overall?
Yeah, thank you so much, Minerva. My name is Matilda Okech, and I work for World Renew as the Director for International Disaster Response. So World Renew's work in Sudan actually dates back in around 2010, and that was Sudan and South Sudan before the separation. Then later on, when the separation occurred, World Renew retained its programming presence in South Sudan. And later on, in around 2023, World Renew picked up again active programming in Sudan. So the work has largely been around humanitarian work, supporting with humanitarian food assistance. Yeah, there's some elements of shelter and non-food items, including things like blankets. Yeah, but also there's been some sections around protection, and this work is both in Sudan and some cross-border operations in South Sudan.
And how did you get involved in the work?
The work actually I started working in World Renew back in 2013. Yeah, so before that I was actually working still in South Sudan, but that was immediately after the independence in South Sudan when the two countries separated. Yeah, so later on after I actually left South Sudan because of the war, then came back home and joined World Renew. So from that time, I've been, supporting the work that is going on in the region, that is in East Africa region, West Africa region, Latin America, Asia. But much of the work that we've been doing in East Africa region has actually been, especially in humanitarian work, has actually been in Sudan and South Sudan.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you do with World Renew. Eltayeb, ZOA is one of the on-the-ground partners of World Renew, doing a lot of work in person. Can you tell us a bit about ZOA and how you yourself got involved?
ZOA is a Dutch international organization founded in 1973 during the Vietnam War. And actually, ZOA is like meaning Southeast Asia. So it is a Christian faith-based organization working in a number of vulnerable countries around the world with a focus on people affected by crisis, whether they are man-made or environment or natural disasters. And their mandate is to help people during the crisis and then also from relief to recovery. This is actually the worldwide. In Africa, it is working in a number of countries, including Sudan, South Sudan. They are in Ethiopia. They are in Congo. So a number of countries in Uganda. So there are in a number of countries in Africa. And in Sudan, they have started working after the first Darfur War in 2004. Starting with emergency relief, then they expanded to peace building, then they start working livelihood wash and emergency response in general. Now, Azawa is working in like 3 of the Darfur states, which is South, North, and East Darfur, and also it's working in 2 of the East Sudan states, which is Gadarif and Kassala, and also they are doing work in Khartoum. This is for ZOA directly, but also through like our some of international partners. ZOA is almost working in other states like Central Darfur, Blue Nile, White Nile, and South Kordofan. So it is really widely spread. It has wide footprint in Sudan, and it is known, as I said, of its dual mandate: relief and from relief to recovery. I started working with ZOA like 10 years ago. And I have been involved in ZOA programs for the last 10 years, taking different roles, different responsibilities. Since last year, I am like the senior emergency response specialist. And this also gives me like this opportunity to work with the entities and organizations that are really supporting emergency response, including World Renew. And I was actually involved in the last project that we implemented together in South Darfur last year, which ends in October.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful for our listeners to get a lay of the land, so to speak. Sudan may elicit a general picture in many people's heads, but there's quite a lot of economic, geographic, and cultural diversity across the country, correct?
Yeah, I think for people when now they hear the word Sudan, maybe the picture is only around the war, around the conflict, or maybe it is a poor country, or it is like a place of hunger and a place of property. Definitely, Sudan. This is not the Sudan that people should also know. Sudan is like a big and diverse country. It is among the three first biggest countries in Africa. It has like very rich resources, including thousands and thousands of arable land that can be used for either agriculture or animal production. Sudan have like wealth of minerals, oil, and a lot of gold and all these type of resources. And also Sudan, for histories, it was known actually to have like some sort of diversified type of economy. It have the rivers, it have the rainfed, and it has the agriculture, the animal production, and it was a country that feeds itself and feeds its neighbors and export to a number of countries in the world. Also, Sudan has like a diverse type of ethnicities and tribes and groups, which Sudan is a country that have almost, people are saying like 500 tribes from different origins, from different ethnicities. Through history, they have really been living in like some sort of harmony. Yes, there are ups and downs in the relationship, but the social fabrics have never ever ruptured to the extent that really they really fail to live together. So I think what people should really know about Sudan, and for people especially like me as Sudanese who knows the hospitality of the people, who knows actually the scenes and the nice weathers, and it's nice and sometimes crazy weather in the country, but it is diverse. I think those who really lived or visited Sudan and have known its people, they really know have a picture for a different Sudan.
Thank you for that perspective. I agree, especially in the US. I think that unfortunately, when people hear Sudan, they picture the Darfur crisis back in the early 2000s. We know a lot has changed since then, but I imagine tensions have always been simmering. Very briefly, how have the recent events led up to the humanitarian crisis that we are seeing today?
You see, what is really happening in Sudan now is not like a small scale type of conflict. It have really turned into like some sort of a wide spread type of conflict that is really using different tactics, different type of strategies of really warring and fighting, and also not only like in internal type of involvement. It has like external actors who has really been influencing, supporting, and actually creating and fueling this type of conflict. This really has really led to like some sort of, number one, for the conflict itself is a risk which really kills people, displaces people, prevent people from really normalizing their lives. As you know, Sudan is the economy of Sudan is mostly dependent on agriculture. So for most of those who have really been forced to displace and leave their areas, or even live in close to their areas but have no accessibility to where they used to live and used to practice their food production, that becomes like some sort of an issue. For those who has really left the area, and we stayed in other places. They are either constrained within like some sort of locations that they cannot really access land of other people. The economy for them is like a problem. So either they are like in, I don't say camp, but they are like in settlement areas, and they are really, the support that is really provided to them is not like the support that should really be to the level that can give them the same dignified type of life. There is a lot of gaps here and there. Again, if you look at also the economy is hardly hit by the war. And also, if you look at also the increase in prices and the economy of the world, that is now every day there is like some sort of hikes. It is also adding its impact on the people. There are people who have also repaired because some places have really been liberated and people feel that now we can go home. They come and the returnees come to find that they lost what they have in their houses. They have lost their means of livelihoods. So they came and also they come to find the crisis waiting for them here. The support that is provided is very limited. If you look at the humanitarian appeals that have been done in the name of Sudan and how much money they request and how much money they receive, for example, the last year, it is only like 35% of what was promised or required was received. And now, up to the end of the first quarter of the year, as far as I understand, out of the 2.9 billion that is really felt that's urgently requested for this year for the humanitarian plan, I think up to the end of March, it is 5.5% funded. So it is huge. People cannot really practice their lives normal. For those who, as real, as I told you, return they are still struggling to reestablish their livelihoods, and it is really a disaster.
Yeah, looking at the tension in Sudan has actually been simmering, and later on, of course, the conflict came to happen. Looking at some of the mass protests that have happened in the past because of hard economic times, yeah, looking at the fragile relationship between the civilians and the military, especially when now the war started, or also out of the mass protest. Yeah, looking at the coup that happened sometime in 2021, those have actually triggered the war to what we see today, and also just the power struggles between the armed forces. Yeah, both the government and the non-government side has really put some strain in the country, and actually that is what is defining the humanitarian crisis that we see today, especially following leading up to the war that broke out in was it April 2023. And we can also see the consequence of that, because that has led to mass displacement, with millions of people forced to flee their homes, either to other locations within the country or outside the country to the neighboring countries. We've also seen the strain that this conflict has had in the institutions, like the health system, the food supply chain, and just the widespread hunger that is across the country. And also, to some extent, we've also seen the human right abuse that also happens, and that also happens during just like many other countries that have been affected by war. So the tension has really come to materialize beyond what probably people expected, and also we can see the impact of that in how it has affected civilians in the country.
Let's talk a little bit more about the humanitarian crisis, as you've mentioned. Is it nationwide? Where is the displacement situation, both internally and as it relates to neighboring countries? Give us an idea of what and where the crisis is.
Yeah, I think that I can say that the crisis is like nationwide and it's affecting different type of people, but variably, it's not the same. For example, in the areas that are still like hot zones where fighting is still really taking place, internal displacement, access issues, and this type of things are really affecting people a lot. This issue, as I said, of livelihood, declining international support, and the numbers are actually very huge. Because if you look at how many IDPs that have really been claimed, maybe up to the latest report I have seen, people are still talking about 10 million. 10 million IDPs. They are talking about 3.5 still refugees in neighboring countries. And as I said, there is also like some sort of return. So in these areas where really people are caught by the fight, accessibility to their livelihoods is not possible. They cannot plan. In the same time, they cannot even work as labor because labor opportunities are really very limited. In the same time, what is they are really receiving like to maintain their livelihood is also declining. For the places where are completely safe and people start going back home, then the problem is still there, waiting for them. Because as I said, their houses are empty, their means of livelihood are not there. So they are coming, escaping a crisis, coming to a crisis where it's really starting. Even for the hosting communities and for the people who are really staying, this inflation, this economic type of crisis, it is really affecting everyone. Prices are really on the high. People are still hosting people in their houses. They cannot even cope with the changing prices. All these type of things are really affecting.
Thank you. Matilda, are you seeing the same?
Yeah, I think Eltayeb has said much of it. And also just to echo that also when we're looking at the aspect of displacement, we find that the same people have also been displaced multiple times because of the
Yes.
ongoing conflict, but also because of the collapse of services. Probably you want some health services, you can't get it, then it forces you to move to another location to get the service that you're looking for. But also just to mention that the displacement has also led some people out of the country to the neighboring countries like Egypt, Chad, South Sudan, Ethiopia, for them to also, try to find a source of living, but also areas that are quite, I'd say, quite secure compared to where they're coming from. There's also a
Mhm.
trend that we're seeing that as much as some of them are living from Sudan into South Sudan, they also again face multiple layer of displacement because some of the countries they're moving into are also facing conflict. Yeah, so it's a dynamic kind of displacement that makes families continue to move from one location to another, and that means that also women and children and even the youth, people tend to lose much of their life during this process.
Thank you for helping us understand why the UN has referred to this as the world's largest humanitarian crisis. It is grave indeed, and thank you both for your perspective. Let's turn to the work that both of your organizations are doing in the country. So, World Renew and ZOA Sudan have partnered to address some of the needs. Where are you specifically working, and what are you witnessing? What stories are you hearing from those people and communities where you work?
I think our first engagement with World Review was last year. We did a food voucher distribution for people affected by the war in South Darfur, mainly in Niala and Shamal and Niala Janub locality. At that time, we really targeted like 2,450 households who were all classified in like emergency type of situation. And I think the outcomes of the work that we really did together, and when we really did the final evaluation, we really found that yes, although the scope of the work is not really covering billions, it is covering only around like 13,000 people, which is like, as I said, 2,450 families. It really helped these families really to improve their food security situation. All the indicators that people look for, like the hunger scale, like the food consumption score, they all show that really there is very good improvement in the lives of these people. The general appreciation and the hope that people still start feeling it. He said, for a while, we really saw that nobody is really remembering us or we may not even get support. This support really is not only helping us to survive, but it's also giving us hope that we are not really forgotten. Some
Mm.
of them have, as Matilda said, like people who have really came from very long distances and they have been displaced more than one time. The majority of them are like single mothers who really either lost their husbands in the war or they have really been separated as a result of the conflict and they really walk very long distances to come and stay in such the time of these places. So the scope of work, as I said, is not like very big, but I think its impact was really very huge. It was really said by the people, it was said by the authorities, it was even reflected in the faces and has really been shown by some of the stories that really people in name, they talk about it, how really it helped them to regenerate their energy and look at the future is like some sort of hope that they are not forgotten, and inshallah things will go better for them. We are also doing like a recovery project in some of the three of the stable localities in South Darfur, where we are helping production and we are helping farmers and the small enterprises really to start producing, and really it really did a very good type of impact. We are also working like a small type of activities in terms of really supporting the last agriculture season. We are really doing many type of activities in the Darfur, South Darfur, East Darfur. In North Darfur, we are also working with like one of our local partners, which is SOS Sahel. We are also intervening in emergency response, and also we are doing like small wash activities, and also we are doing like some sort of support of the education.
Yeah, so beyond the work that we're doing with ZOA in South Darfur, we're also working in East Darfur with another national organization or local organization, if you like that. Yeah, doing some food assistance, doing some non-food distribution of non-food items to support with shelter, especially during when people get displaced. Yeah, also providing some hygiene kits for women of reproductive age, and that work started sometime last year, and it's still ongoing. Yeah, but also we recognize that there's some cross-border, people leaving Sudan into South Sudan. So we are also doing some cross-border operations in South Sudan, looking at aspects of food assistance, aspects of protection, things to do with gender-based violence in terms of case management, psychosocial support, some initiatives around peace building, especially to promote peaceful coexistence, because when these families move to new locations, you find that they also find host communities, and that can create some tension. But also we are doing also some interventions around health, equipping health facilities so that they can be able to absorb the increased surge in patients that are accessing services.
Related to this last question for each of you, what are you witnessing that people just can't grasp through the news reports? Matilda, do you want to go first?
Some of the stories I've heard, for example, I was in South Sudan around the border areas in January of this year, January 2026. Some of the stories that I heard from women who had crossed the border was stories of them, their phones were taken during the process of them moving from Sudan into South Sudan. Yeah, some of the money that they had with them, to help them or support them with their children at the point of crossing was also taken away. And sadly, there were also cases of rape that had happened in the process. Yeah, and also during that time, I was able to witness the UNHCR vehicles or buses ferrying people from Sudan into South Sudan into the reception centers. And the majority of them are women and children, because from what I understand or what I was told is that the able-bodied male, a majority of them remained back home to, secure some of the few items that they were able to secure, but also some of them were recruited into the conflict. Despite all that, you find that the people within the reception areas or within the camps had a lot of hope. And that also demonstrates the kind of resilience that people have. Even as they're moving, they had hope that things would be better. And there's also a story that was told that I witnessed actually from one of the Sudanese who had actually started business in South Sudan, actually within the camps. So he had opened a shop and was selling things within the camp, and the family was thriving. And this also just tells us the story about how these people are also resilient. That, if at all it was not for that conflict, then, they're actually able to take care of their families, they're able to continue their daily lives in terms of education and just enjoy life. So given an opportunity and also in terms of the kind of work that we do, more focus into resilience, then things are likely to go back to normal as long as there is no conflict happening in the country.
Yeah, for me, when you see what really comes in the reports and whatever, I think I feel that not enough light has been shed in the emotions of the people. Maybe people will just, for example, focus on rape, sexual violence, and this type of thing, and really present some of the victims, things like that. But they really didn't show much of the emotions of the people when they really feel constrained. I am able. I can work. I see my farm. I can't access it. I am losing my livelihoods. I really want to depend on myself. I can produce. I am able. You get my point. This was really not being captured well in the report. Again, something that is really very important for us as a Sudanese. We feel that this war is not a necessary war for us. It's something that just erupted, and it is not really like the choice of the Sudanese. Again, something that is very important. It is really rupturing our social fabrics. We have been living for generations and generations in harmony. Different tribes, different people, different whatever. We are like just weaved like a fabric or like a cloth. A lot have really happened, and really, as Sudanese, it really hurt us. We really want this really war to stop, and really want to resume our lives, and really want to have our social ties really rebuilt like the same. And also, as Sudanese, we work with the same soul, with the same spirit, with the same hospitality, and really rebuild our country.
Thank you. Thank you for humanizing this conflict for us and sharing the impacts that you're seeing on the ground. Let's talk a little bit about the aid that is currently getting through. What are those resources that are being directed currently, and where do you think they can make a bigger impact? Matilda, do you want to start us off?
So aid is actually getting into the country depending on the kind of intervention that people are doing. For example, if you're doing humanitarian assistance, yeah, food can get into the country. But also, I must say that also it's limited based on various factors. At times it's limited or even uneven, or at times disrupted by convoy attacks or delays that can happen in the process of transporting the commodities, whether that is food or maybe other items that agencies are providing to the people affected by crisis. And I'd say that what reaches the people is heavily dependent on location, like where is it coming from, and also the security and the access routes. So you find that agencies that are operating in the countries have been able to, know how to maneuver through that to ensure that aid gets through. And a majority of that is aid that is directed towards food and nutrition, which are some of the lifeline that people are, dependent on. And also, Eltayeb had said initially that they're also doing some wash support, that is water sanitation and hygiene, because that is so desperately needed. And there's also multi-purpose cash being provided, meaning that people can also access other services, probably things like health on their own, and also other, non-food items, things like, buying things like blankets, buckets to help them, survive during this difficult time. So aid is getting in, but can also be limited depending on the conflict and the routes that people are taking.
Some aid is coming, but if you look at the aid and you look at the magnitude of need, and as I said, you raise a humanitarian plan for like 2.9 million, and you only manage to fund up to the end of the first quarter like 5% of it. So you can really see the gap. Again, yes, I agree with Matilda to a large extent that yes, even for some of the things that really come and they are really supposed to reach people, there is like some sort of attack to convoys. There is also like suspicion from both sides that these convoys are not carrying assistance, it may be carrying something else. So that is also affecting the whole thing. But what I really want to say, there is like some sort of a variety of methods that people can really use. There are different approaches that people can use, because no person can say that even in the hottest war zone in Sudan, now there are no markets, so there are no supplies. Even during the war, people find their ways to especially the private sector, how really they can feed the markets, how really they can feed because most of the international organizations that are really, for example, buying supplies, they really want to do wash, they want to do whatever, they buy it from local markets. Either they buy it from Niyala, they buy it from Aldain, they buy it from even Tawila. So the economy, during any time there is like some sort of ways that means to bring things through the private sector. But what I'm trying to say, rather than making it like some sort of like in kind that you are transporting food that can be like subject to like being taken or being robbed during the, why don't you really be innovative and really try to work with the local market systems, give people cash, multi-purpose cash, whatever, or even you can contract like local suppliers who can provide the food. With the project that we implemented with the World Renew through the Canadian Food Grain Bank, we didn't bring food from any place outside of the area that we are really working in, because the system there, the merchants there, the private sector there, they can deal with the war because they have their own connection, they have their own routes, they have their own ways of approaching nearby countries, and they can really bring the supplies. So why don't we have our own system of doing convoys and doing big things that we cannot protect, and they are really very, very attractive to those who really want to take them, rather than using the local systems and really try to support people the way they want to support themselves.
That's such an important point you're making, I think, and really adds to the sustainability of the region if they could do more of internal sourcing of food and resources. How would you compare what private charities like yours are doing operating in comparison to large multinational or government groups? Is it easier, harder, different? How so?
Yeah, generally, you find that humanitarian work is done largely through coordination. Some of the organization, like for example, World Renew, will really leverage on organizations that are already in the country because they know the context. They can maneuver through the context and have the assistance delivered in a timely way, and also using the channels within the country. Largely because they know the context, they can even reach hard to, they can better reach or access hard to reach areas. They're even more faster or more flexible because they know the people, they know the terrain. And one of the challenges that is there that I must say is also limited funding. Some of the small organizations or charity organizations have less funding or are even unstable compared to larger organizations like the UN bodies. Yeah, and even the other advantage that also the smaller agencies like ours have is that they're really community based. So even these people who are affected by crisis, a majority of them identify with them because they know what people really want, and they can also operate with them in a way that is, I'd say, generally that they identify with them. These are your own brothers and sisters within the country compared to someone who is coming from a foreign place. Yeah, so I'd say that there are the advantages to it and also some of the challenges that people experience from it. When you're a national, you know the terrain, you can maneuver. Yeah, when you're international, also there are other challenges that you face, like bureaucracy. As much as you have funding, at times you may have access challenges. So it's a give and take. But the bottom line is that both of these agencies work really coordinate together so that assistance can be delivered in the right way.
I just want to add something which is in line with what Matilda has said. Actually, if you look at for example, ZOA, for example, now our headquarters is not in Darfur. We are between Port Sudan and Gaddafi. But through this time, we really maintain that presence in Darfur. Why? Because definitely most of our staff are from Darfur. They are originated from there. So they belong to this community. They are from there. They know the context. They can deal with the challenges, things like that. Again, according to the laws of the country, international organizations should work closely with local partners, which is local organizations. So that is also part of what we are really doing, not only because it is a requirement, because also we have a localization policy. So in all these places, we have our local partners. Our local partners, as also Matilda said, they are really also well connected. Most of them are pure from the areas. They know the area, they know the people, and even they know how to deal with the situation at very critical time of times. They also weigh the security risk, and also they can really have their own interpretation to the risk and how really they can do that type of risk. So this type of what do you call it, like modalities, whereby you have like national teams on the ground, local parties on the ground, doing like some sort of remote type of management, looking for third party type of monitoring. That is really helping us really to remain to stay all this time. But as I said, as a category of international organization, our problems are different. The risks that are really facing us are different. And as I said, our collective voice and our adherence to international law and the to international humanitarian standards is actually what really maintain us in like some sort of good shape, and we can cope with all the challenges that we are really facing.
Thank you. Thank you to both and your organizations for the work that you're doing to address the crisis. Let's turn to advocacy. So, the Alliance to End Hunger is primarily an advocacy organization, and many of our listeners want to know what they can do to help, what is needed most now, and what messages they should be carrying with them to policymakers in the US. Matilda, do you want to start us off?
One of the key messaging is that for the humanitarian crisis, we find that the funding has been really cut, especially when the US government stopped some of its operations. You find that that really impacted humanitarian support, not only in Sudan, but also in the neighboring countries that are supporting this crisis. Yeah, so the call is just to ensure that we can get sustained humanitarian funding to be able to deliver our mandate. Not only the funding, but also the funding should be flexible in a way that, for example, beyond not it being restricted to a given sector. Because the contexts keep on changing, let me say, every day. Yeah, so the need for today may not be the need for tomorrow. Once a given need is probably fulfilled, the funding should be flexible enough to allow room for, the implementing agencies to be able to innovate and address the need for today. Yeah, then the other thing is around humanitarian access because, with the conflict, you find that at times aid is not getting to the people in good time. So if we can improve that, and at times that is at a very higher level of advocacy, especially around ceasefire. Yeah, and if the government can also support some of the cross-border operations, that will also be very good, especially for the people who are fleeing the country to the neighboring countries. Protection issues are concerned, and that is something that also is not, I'd say, is not being highlighted or supported in ways that are quite, I'd say, adequate, including mental health, because some of these people who are experiencing the war are really going through a lot of mental health challenges. So if that can be put into consideration, it will be good for this work to continue.
I think for the policy and decision makers, they should know that this type of crisis and this type of starvation, people dying, you cannot park it. Tell no, this is not important now. If this is really an issue that is really affecting like millions of people, you cannot really park it and think about another political type of ambition or things like that. So humanity is humanity. This which should really lead the thinking of people. Again, I agree 100%. You cannot just cut funds because of other things. Your obligations to humanity should really be the driving force that should really guide actually the thinking. And what is really every time what is really promised for Sudan is not really fulfilled. It's not fulfilled. You talk about a plan, as I said, for like 2.9 billion, then it ends up having 35 to 25% of it. And people are talking about starvation. They're talking about people dying in some of the areas, like some epidemics in some of the areas, returnees who really need to reestablish their life. So I think there should be like some sort of fairness and balance rather than just really focusing on what really want to see. Look, see the world with the eyes of those who really need your support.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you for sharing about the work you do and for helping us to understand better the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. At this point, I always like to ask folks, is there something you wanted to share or say that maybe we didn't ask? Eltayeb?
as a Sudanese, just detach me from ZOA, detach me from any other entity. As a Sudanese, really, my heart is really broken because I know really the heritage of this country. Have really been born, educated, and I have worked years and years in this country. I have toured the whole country. I work in Darfur, I work in the Nuba Mountains, I work in Northern Sudan, I work in Eastern Sudan. Wherever that I have worked, I have never felt that I'm a different person. I haven't really felt that I'm dealing with different people. We are the same. I am welcome whatever place that I have gone. Maybe the first song that I also I am a poet and I write poetry, and the first poem that I did is for Niala, not my hometown Kassala. And the song that I have is for Niala, not for my hometown Kassala. We belong to where we go, where we live, where we say, when we really feel the people and the people feel us. So Sudan is really in like some sort of a gesture. It is really in like some sort of a turning point. And unless this all is stopped and really people think seriously how really they can rebuild and really build the social ties, and how really try to really to change the language that is now in the social media, and how really bring people together, I'm sure we will lose a lot of the good things that we used to have and used to live, and we are really very happy with.
Yeah, I like to say that also amidst the crisis, I believe there's hope, and that is what we're clinging on to ensure that the people who are facing this crisis are able to get some, relief and some resilience over time. World Renew is a Christian humanitarian and development organization working globally to address hunger, poverty, and disaster. The organization has partnered with communities to respond to immediate needs and support long-term sustainable development. And largely, the organization works through partners, both international partners and also national partners, to deliver locally led interventions in both disasters and long-term community development work. Yeah, the focus is largely to strengthen resilience, restore livelihoods, and also to foster hope. And you are guided by the commitment to justice, compassion, and also partnerships as we walk alongside communities as they pursue lasting change and renewed future.
I want to say one last thing, which is like a small poem that I wrote like some years ago. We are born free and equal in Atlanta or Darfur, and these rights are universal. Why we hate and why is war? With respect and good intentions, love and peace will find home. This applies in Toronto, in Mogadishu, or in Rome. Do respect human rights, whether in Sydney or Khartoum. Let us agree on genuine choice and commit for love and peace. Peace will build a stable world where we live and work at ease. Do respect human rights, whether in Gaza or Paris. Do respect human rights, whenever you are. Thank you very much.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Matilda, Eltayeb, thank you so much for joining the Voices to End Hunger podcast today. It's been my pleasure to meet both of you. And I want to extend again my appreciation for the amazing and life-saving work that you're doing in Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
That was Matilda Okech of Alliance member organization World Renew and Eltayeb Omer Hamid of ZOA. You can learn more about these organizations as well as the conflict and crisis in Sudan by visiting our show notes. If you have any questions or comments about today's show or ideas for future episodes, you can email us at podcast@alliance10hunger.org. Today's episode was produced and edited by Nate McGrath. I'm Minerva Delgado. See you next time.